Welcome to the Workforce Show's Young Professionals podcast series.
So, hello, Nicole, and I want to welcome you to the Workforce Show, and it's very, very exciting to have you being our first guest on the podcast series. And
thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure, we're sure. And I chose you because your boss told me to. No, he couldn't speak enough about you, speak highly enough about you, and he said, you know, everything. I'm going to say this for you to tell, but he was waxing eternal, and so I thought, oh well, we'll go for her first one. But I have found since then that you are a very, very interesting woman. And a
Thank you.
very exciting stories to tell, and beside that, you're young. So first of all, I would like you to meet our listeners. This is Nicole Eichmann.
Eichoff.
Eichmann.
You're fine.
Eichoff, and she works for ScienceLogic, and so I've going to start off the conversation with her, but I'm going to let her tell her own story because it's so interesting, and I think worth hearing. And for anybody who is thinking about changing jobs or getting into a career field in technology that they had no experience in before, she has the stories to tell. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Cindy. It's great to be here.
So let's start off by telling us, where were you born, and do you have any brothers and sisters?
Sure. Yeah. So I am from everywhere. I was a military brat. I was born in Dayton, Ohio, but only lived there for 2 years before my family moved me all over. I was raised mostly in Virginia, Yorktown, Virginia. Where the history comes from. And,
yeah, we heard about Yorktown, right?
Yes. And so I grew up a history buff with my brother, who was just 2 years my junior. And we're a very close family. My parents still live there. My brother still lives there with his wife and 2 dogs, and my fur niece and nephew. And we had a really interesting childhood there. Really got us into being curious about everything.
Well, you said your father flew. Was he in the Air Force?
He was in the Air Force.
Because he was stationed in Ohio.
B-1 bombers. The coolest plane in the world.
Oh, really? B-1 bombers. I haven't heard that since the Second World War. The movies. Was
B-52s, maybe.
Which?
B-1 bombers were developed about 28 years ago.
28 years ago. Wow, and he flew them.
And he was one of the pioneers in that project.
Did he have to land on ships?
No. B-1 bombers are too big for that.
Okay, because I know Yorktown is close to Newtown.
The Langley Air Force Base.
Okay, Langley Air Force Base.
Yep. It's a huge, that Tidewater area is just full of different naval bases, marine bases, just joint naval bases with other, it's a lot. But he was stationed at Langley.
Okay, so there you are, little Nicole's in Yorktown, in the midst of a happy family. And so where did you go to school?
Well, I went to school in 2 places. So the first time we lived in Virginia, I went to Trinity Lutheran, and then I came back and went to York High. But I took 1 year off to go to Washington, D.C., where I would later return, but we'll get to that later. It was in 2001, 2002, my junior year in high school. And that may sound familiar to you, that date range. My very first day of work was actually 9/11.
9/11. So that made a lasting impression on you, didn't it?
It very much did. It very much did. But it was an honor to continue to serve for second semester. And
I'm sorry, what did you do in there?
I was a page.
A page.
I was a U.S. congressional page.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very good. And so you were here during 9/11?
I was.
For your first time. And so after a year, you went back home and finished high school?
I did. I went back and I finished high school. And then I went to James Madison for a year and played a bit of tennis. And then I transferred to the University of Virginia. And that's where I had a junior year abroad. So continuing with the junior year somewhere else theme, my junior year, or actually not the junior year, it was actually my senior year. My junior year was the plan and it didn't happen. So then I ended up doing it my senior year and I went to Spain.
You went to Spain, and
Yes.
that's where the story begins, folks. We will save that for you to tell later on
Sure.
as well. So James Madison, I know because my brother went there
Yeah.
as James Madison, but you've had a very, very interesting background in all the way to high school, and you were, what did you want to do? Why were you a page?
I was a page because I was really passionate about my local congresswoman. She was a very passionate businesswoman, and she was incredibly passionate about helping other small businesses to grow and to strengthen. She was very passionate about just local ordinances and stuff like that, things that most people would find boring, but she knew how it affected small businesses. And so when she ran for Congress, I was only 16 years old, but I joined her team. I said, I can't vote for you, but can I join your team? And I did. So I campaigned for the late Joanne Davis of the 1st District of Virginia.
She's no longer there.
Yes,
Okay.
she passed away several years ago from cancer, unfortunately. But when she got to Congress, she was given the opportunity to recruit a page, and she called me.
So where did you live? You weren't even graduated.
They had a page program school. Like we had a school. We went to school in the top of the Library of Congress. That was our school.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Very early mornings.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. I learned something new. Where pages go to work.
Yep.
And I have a friend whose son was a page, but he lived at home, and he was a page. So after high school,
Yes.
and you went to college, James Madison to begin with, and then you went to UVA. So why did you transfer to UVA?
I always wanted to go to the University of Virginia, and
Was it all that you expected?
it was not what I expected, to be honest. I wanted to go there for a very, very long time, and it was the school that I had wanted to go to for a number of reasons. I was interested in international business. I was interested in the strong liberal arts kind of school with the history, and in particular, the thing that attracted me most to the University of Virginia was the honor code that they have. The honor system is highly regarded there and ancient, and also pretty sacred to most of the students who go there. And so when I did transfer over and go to the University of Virginia, I joined the honor system as an educator. I helped people learn about what the honor system history was and how to help follow it.
Yeah, it's a very good school, and a lot of people want to go there. Not people who don't live in Virginia and wish that they were here and going there, but so that's good. So
It's a
you
great
graduated from UVA, and then what?
Well, like I said, I had spent some time in my senior year in Spain. And I fell in love with Spain, and I also fell in love with someone in Spain who would then later play a very large role in my life as my future husband. So when I graduated, I went right to work trying to get into a master's degree there. And I did. I studied international migration and labor markets in Valencia, Spain.
What?
International migration of people and labor
people.
markets.
Okay.
So studying why people go different places for work.
And did you have an answer? Did you come up with an answer?
We did lots of models, yes. I did my capstone on south-north migration from Africa to Spain and comparing that to Mexico and the United States. That really got me into modeling. It helped me to really reinforce a lot of the economics.
By the way, it's modeling with numbers, not herself. She didn't model herself.
Yes, modeling with
she's
numbers.
Attractive enough that she could model herself.
Oh my goodness, I'm blushing now.
But we're talking about data analytics, data science.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
It helped to reinforce that economics background that I had at UVA. So, I was really into that. And I was also very interested in the refugee experience and how refugees experience their new lands wherever they land. And so I was really passionate about that. But when I graduated in 2009, you might know that date as well. The financial crisis, the worldwide financial crisis, was still in very full swing, especially in Spain. And at the time, we were actually living on a small island in the Canary Islands, right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And we lived there for a year. We were very happy, and it was so fun. But I got restless, and I really wanted a job. And so my husband agreed to come with me to the United States, and we moved to Washington, D.C., actually Arlington, and I worked at the Washington, D.C. Women's Business Center with Samira Cook Gaines, and she became one of the shining stars in my life as far as mentorship is concerned. She taught me how to really grow into my professionalism, and she taught me confidence and why you should always have heels at your office when you work right in front of the White House, for example. She was fantastic in every way. And a lot of my career grew out of the things that I learned helping women to start and grow businesses with her.
So you've had a lot of women who've influenced your life and your decisions.
So many. I mean, obviously my mom, Jeannie Eichoff, she's an artist. She she used to be a graphic artist, and when she moved to Virginia, she started focusing more on her former background, which was fine art and painting. And she is pretty famous in Yorktown circles for her depictions of the Yorktown buildings and landscaping and stuff like that. It's beautiful. Eichsci.com. And she's the first and most important influencer of my life, of course. And later I would meet women who were actually closer to my age that became really big influencers in especially the career transition that I ended up making into data science after helping women, primarily women, to start and grow businesses for almost a decade.
Mm-hmm. So the transition... you were always, I mean, I didn't realize this, but you were always involved in like modeling data analytics, weren't you? I mean, So it wasn't so much a transition as a movement forward. Is that it?
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, you said I was young, but let's be very specific. I'm 35.
That's young.
And so I had a career where I did a lot of business development work where I would help women to really get into the business planning pieces of how to construct their businesses. Mm-hmm. A lot of that had to do with market research and crunching the numbers and doing predictions for what kind of financial plans they should put together and how their loans would kind of work out depending on what kind of interest rate they were trying to go for or what size loan they were trying to go for, looking at debt to income ratios. So I've always been a sucker for the numbers, but you're right. The data modeling has always been part of my career ever since, all the way back to my degrees at UVA. And, math is a friend that's always been there. Sometimes we fought a little bit, maybe, and like in my grade school years or something like that. But at the end of the day, I think that data really has been a through line in a lot of the things that I've been most passionate about, no matter what it was I was studying or working on. Refugees, migrants, women starting businesses, everything. The data has always been really important to me. As a fact, I actually built a small database when I was at one of the women's business centers I worked at, the one in Washington, D.C., that just to be able to handle the number of clients that we were receiving, because databases were expensive at the time. Even just 10 years ago, the databases were really expensive.
And that database that you created for your clients or for this.
No, it was for us. It was for the Women's Business Center to be able to better tell our story about our success. So how many women have made money this year versus how many have lost money?
That's what I meant. Those women you were telling, you have a database of women, and within the database you have different offshoots of how, and that's pretty much like we were discussing earlier, that how you do data analytics and how you build models based on the data that you get. But you have the ground floor experience of collecting the data.
Oh yeah, collecting it and using it, right? Analyzing it and trying to figure out, what does this mean? What story can we tell with this data?
So you weren't always, or were you? I wasn't even sure. Were you interested in data and in math when you were younger?
I think maybe science is the thing that I was more proud to tell people that I was into. So science was always my favorite subject, except for chemistry.
Okay, so science and from data migration, I mean, from studying migration to
So I mean, one thing that we've got to remember, I think, is that even just in 2007, when I was in college, data science was not a degree that you could get. Very few people even the term data scientist didn't even come along until I was.
What term did they use before then?
They didn't. Usually, data scientist is actually a relatively new thing. Machine learning is probably the closest that you would get. So machine learning and people who wrote algorithms and stuff like that go well back to the 70s. And, some of the algorithms that we use today were invented, 30, 40 years ago. So that's really interesting, and probably another story for a different day. But I think that as far as it being a career field where businesses and leadership in businesses knew what to do with a data scientist, right? And knew what to do with someone who could use those algorithms and tools and code bases, that wasn't really a thing when I was starting my college experience, and pretty well after I graduated. It's really kind of exploded in the last, 5 years or so. Although there were data scientists before, usually they were machine learning experts or some other title.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating that, today we are comfortable using terms that existed before but weren't called that.
Right.
And so everybody in science and in data and in any aspect of data analytics says, well, we've always used this.
Right.
Why it's so new? It is new because you're valued for what you know and how you put the piece together. And so you were working for the women's groups and helping women understand their options. And then you went to work for whom? I forget.
Well, so then I decided to make a career change. So I kind of hit the, a job title that I had been aspiring to for a long time. Ever since I had started in Washington, D.C., I was like, yes, I'm a director of a women's business center. And I'm so excited to finally be able to make, this kind of impact on women's lives. And while I'm very proud to say that we, trained thousands of women, we mentored and counseled hundreds. And that I think that we actually made a really big impact while I was there. Sometimes your passion, you find out that something that you're passionate about
gets old,
gives you a level of burnout, may be a term, but I think another term is also to understand that your passion is being absorbed by others. And intrinsic motivation can only last for so long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true for a lot of occupations, especially if you're using your heart and soul
right.
to get something done. And so you gave up. You shifted. So
I did. I found that the culture wasn't a very good fit to begin with. So some of the other some of the philosophies where I was didn't quite fit with me and my personality and my aspirations. And then on top of it, I found myself just working more and more and more for something that the intrinsic passion started to wane a little bit. So all of those things kind of culminated in this one moment where it just became absolutely necessary for me to stop and switch. So I took quite a bit of time off. I took almost half a year off to study Python and SQL and some of the code languages that are needed to become a data scientist. And I didn't really know if I was going to become a data scientist per se, but I did know that if I learned these tools, that I might become some sort of data analyst and kind of go into that modeling career where you can say, where you can work with like sales teams or something like that, where you can say, we predict that such and such product is going to be the product of the year, or we need to decrease spending in this area, or this, things like that I was already doing, right? In my mindset, I was thinking I was going to help larger businesses to start and grow and use data to do that. But it turned out that data science, which is significantly different from data analysis, there's data analysis that gets to a certain point, and then data science is literally using the scientific method. You start with a hypothesis and some observations, and then you collect the data and you do experiments, and those experiments then turn into more observations that you record and create results and conclusions. And those conclusions in my field of data science have turned into features and products for software. So that's been the honor of my life to get to do, because building things and inventing things is so much fun.
Yeah.
And I have not found a problem that I have not found interesting.
And I want to tell people that you work for ScienceLogic.
Absolutely.
And tell us real quickly, because we're about out of time, what is it that draws you? What do you think about ScienceLogic, and what is it that draws you to it?
All right. So ScienceLogic is awesome.
It's awesome. Okay.
And we're hiring. This is a career transition show. We are hiring for software engineers and all kinds of great positions. So had to put that one out there. Shameless plug. But I actually wanted to work for ScienceLogic the first day that I had a meeting with them. And I was working at another company. It was a startup with about 11 people in it. And there were some people that were on my team at Build On Me, who knew people at ScienceLogic. And we were going to work on a project together. We had a meeting, and I was impressed with every single person that I met since I walked in the door to the incredibly intelligent people who were in the room. We were talking about the project, but then one of the executives or project managers had said to me, well, what do you think about this idea? And we nerded out for like half an hour extra, just talking about a product that I now am working on, right? It was his idea 3 years ago, actually now. And he wanted to start building out some anomaly prediction. He wanted to start looking at things like event correlation for IT software that ScienceLogic provides, and have this AI ML kind of this AI run engine that would be able to make stronger predictions and help to reduce human error and also human eyeballs on screens watching all of these different servers and devices that we monitor. And I was also impressed by the values that they put on the wall. Be nerdy, be bold, you matter, empower success, and create wow. And I was like, this is where I want to work. And they didn't have a position for data scientists at the time, but I stayed in contact. And, I worked at another small business before I actually got the opportunity to work at ScienceLogic. But when the position was open, they called me, and it was one of those moments that felt like, this is why I work so hard. And this is what was meant to be. And it's weird to get emotional about work.
But you are getting emotional about work.
but it's been everything I expected and more. Whereas I spent years and years and years hoping to go to the University of Virginia, and it was great, but it wasn't what I expected in some ways. It was very competitive and stuff. And then to come here and say, oh, well, maybe that's going to be the same. Maybe it's going to be the same kind of experience where you expect one thing and then it's not the same, but it's actually better than what I expected. And, thank you, God.
The story is that, the fascinating part about your story is that you had a search. You went in different jobs, and then you found something that you really, really loved, and you couldn't have known that when you started. And you became enamored with it as you've grown with the company.
Absolutely.
And so that's my hat's off to ScienceLogic, but also to you for being persevering and to know what you're looking for. And you didn't know when you started off that you knew you were in, something with data, because data and migration, et cetera. But I have to tell your boss then, so we'll keep that a secret. So we'll do that. Do you have any final words? Because I think you are just marvelous and a true spokesperson for career development for people for anybody who is searching and looking for a place to call home. Right. And that's it.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, you can't always expect that there will be a final home for anything. Mm-hmm. I've joined ScienceLogic in its 16th year, and
how long?
16th. It's well over 16 years old.
Oh, ScienceLogic.
Yes,
not you.
No, and what happens with amazing companies that have spent almost working on now 2 decades of really, really hard work with incredibly hardworking software engineers and great teams that do really amazing work in sales and creating a brand that is so worthwhile that it makes the front line of the Forrester Wave and up in the top quadrant of Gartner. That companies like that, at some point in time, they will grow. They will grow into something new, and there will be a new phase.
This is my last question for you. What is the one thing that you can point to at ScienceLogic that you think has created their growth, created their culture?
I think that when they did the project to reveal what they thought their values were, and everyone was 100% on board with that, all the way from leadership down to everyone else and back up again, that the values that we live go straight to the core of the company. And as we grow, and especially in this next phase where there may be an even bigger expansion, that creates a little bit of growing pains. Everybody grows. It's like, oh well, I don't know everybody's name anymore when I walk down the hallway. Those kinds of things that maybe some of the employees who've been there for a little while may miss. Those growing pains are going to be survivable because the core doesn't change.
Thank you. And I think the company that you work for will thank you for the things that you said about them. I've heard
they earned it.
They've earned it. I've talked to a lot of people who wish that they weren't in that company, and for a lot of reasons. But you found a company that you want to work for, and that's credit for you. It's all the credit for you. Thank you very much, Nicole. That's Niccole
Eichoff.
And she is an employee.
Data scientist.
What is your title?
I'm a data scientist at ScienceLogic.
Data scientist at ScienceLogic. Thank you.
You're so welcome, Cindy. Thank you for having me.
Okay.